right, greetings and welcome to another episode of the Unnamed Bracketology Podcast. My name is Kerry Miller, here with my co-host and good friend Graham Dorn, coming to you on a Monday instead of a Sunday. We were a little busy yesterday. We'll be celebrating a little bit later. Dry January did us well. I carried it into dry February because we figured out that the Chiefs kept winning when I was not drinking, but they don't play again for like 8 months, so I can drink all I want now. Don't really have a particular plan in place. We're going to go through my whiteboard update, which went viral. You got to start posting pictures of your chalkboard, man. People go nuts over this stuff. This is the second one I've done in a few days, and it's going crazy. But just going to kind of go conference by conference because kind of figure there are a lot of people just now diving into college basketball. Maybe we'll get a whole 50 people watching this one now that it's really bracketology season. But what, aside from the Super Bowl, is one game this weekend that jumped out to you as a real bracket changer?
I really think Washington State winning at Oregon was important for both teams because Washington State moves to me well into the bracket as a 9 seed, and Oregon's bubble hopes dissipated. They're gone. So just one less team that the Pac-12 could potentially have getting into the bracket. Also solidifying a spot in some ways. I don't want to say, they're in the field or anything like that, but I
Yeah,
think Washington State's very comfortable at this point.
yeah. I mean, for me, it was the Florida and Texas A&M getting those huge home wins. Florida over Auburn by 16, Texas A&M over Tennessee by 16. That took. I mean, we talked about them a couple days ago. That both those SEC teams were around like that 10 seed range. They were a tough team to evaluate. Now I have them both as sevens. I thought that was huge for both of them. But let's just go conference by conference. I broke each league into 6 columns. Don't know how well you can read them, but it's stone cold locks. Don't F it up. Should be fine on the bubble. Kind of close and not dead yet. And a lot of people were seeming to not understand that on the bubble doesn't necessarily mean like I think they're playing in Dayton right now. If you go through like line by line, I think there are 9 locks, 31 total in the first 3 columns. So there are 15 teams like in my field that I have listed as on the bubble, but this is less of a today picture and more of a, because I only have 9 locks, right? So these are the teams that could not possibly play their way out. North Carolina, Houston, Kansas, Baylor, UConn, Marquette, Purdue, Tennessee, and Arizona. Those are your 1s and 2 seeds, and Baylor as a 3 seed. That's pretty much where we're at right now. But we're going to go league by league, and Graham is going to argue with anything that he disagrees with. I'm going to guess we'll have a couple of arguments in the ACC alone. But so North Carolina, stone cold lock. They're in the mix for a 1 seed. I don't think there's going to be any argument about the locks. Duke and Clemson as don't F it up teams. Where are you at with Duke and Clemson?
I think Duke is really, really close to locking in a bid after beating Wake Forest tonight.
Yeah.
I still think they're not quite there, just because the ACC has some potential landmines in front of them. But otherwise, really, really close. And Clemson, I think, is a 5 seed at this point,
Yep.
but could easily be a 4 seed if the committee did their reveal today. I think Clemson is closer to that 4 line than they would be a 6. So I just think all that early work they did in the non-conference is going to pay off in the tournament bid.
I think where is Wake Forest in the net? Did Duke finally get a quad 2 win tonight, or is Wake Forest top 30? I'm not sure
Quad
where
2,
Okay, I'll
I
take it.
believe.
They were 0-3,
Yeah.
so it's nice to see them get one there. Nobody in the should be fine bucket, so really just 3 ACC teams pretty comfortably in. On the bubble, Virginia, Wake Forest, I think they're kind of extremes of the bubble. Virginia is 8, 9 seed range. You could argue a 7. I actually have them as a 10. I'm still a little bit skeptical because they had all those losses by like 16 plus points. I think their predictives are going to matter to some degree there. Whereas Wake Forest, you said they were one of your last teams in. I think they're still a little bit out for now, but again, that's kind of shows you the range of this on the bubble bucket. But where do you have Virginia now?
I have them as an 8 seed, and I actually looked at them potentially being a 7. I didn't quite get there because uh, those predictives actually kind of made me hesitate a little bit. If you look at their resume metrics, really good.
Yeah,
Off the top of my head, I don't have them, but I think it's like 22 and 24, I
yeah,
want to
something
say.
like that.
So really good resume metrics, but they're still lacking quality wins. They got blown out at Notre Dame. I think the committee pays attention to some of those games where you're not competitive more than you'd think.
Yeah.
It's not just about the game in, game out total predictives. I think when you get blown out in one particular game, sometimes that really kind of raises an eyebrow.
It's one thing to have one or two duds, but when you get destroyed 5 times on the road, and you know, Virginia fans were coming at me hard for this whiteboard. I don't know if they posted a picture of it at John Paul Jones Arena. People were just freaking out, but somebody was saying like, they were dealing with some injuries. I'm like, okay, was he only hurt on the road? Was this a Doug McDaniel situation? Because you won some home games and then had terrible blowout road losses bucketed in them, like, or bookending them, not bucketing them. But yeah, I think when you lose that many times that convincingly, they are red hot right now. I mean, I think they would absolutely be in the field if the tournament started today. But I'm not convinced. And like you were saying with Duke, still opportunities for bad losses in the ACC. Kind of close. Would not have any of these teams in today, but could see it with one or two quality wins. Miami, Pitt, Virginia Tech. Which of those teams do you think is probably closest? Do you think either of them should be moved in either direction?
Uh, I think you could argue all three of them should be not dead yet. But yeah, I mean, when you're not on the bubble,
Yeah.
I think kind of close about sums it up. Um, I think Virginia Tech has the best wins of that group, but they also took a loss at Notre Dame. So I think they're really kind of out of the picture until uh, they do something, and they don't have many opportunities. I think they kind of need a win in Chapel Hill, or that's going to be it for them,
Yeah.
and that's a tall, tall, tall task.
I think Miami's the only one on here that I really kind of looked at for my bracket for this morning, and even then it was a pretty quick no based on all the bad that they've done. And then not dead yet. These are the teams that if they win every remaining regular season game, sure, they can get in the conversation, but they're if you're just crossing off teams that you're not even considering today, these are going pretty quickly. NC State, Syracuse, Florida State. Syracuse is only there because of their resume metrics. I don't even understand how they are still like 53rd because they really haven't done anything. But do you think there's any path for any of those teams to get in?
I mean, I agree with you. They're not dead yet. They're technically, it could happen, but realistically, no. And I think that's the same case for Miami, Pitt, and Virginia Tech too. I don't think any of those teams are. You give me all six of those teams, I'm confident none of them are going to get in the field. So, is it a situation where any of them are dead? No, I don't think that's the case. But I really don't realistically think any of them are making it.
Yeah. All right. Big 12, much more interesting. Way more teams in play here. Houston, Kansas, Baylor. Some Iowa State fans were yelling at me that I didn't have them as a lock, but I do have Baylor. I actually have Iowa State seeded ahead of Baylor, but I'm more comfortable if both of those teams were to lose all of their games. Iowa State having done nothing in non-conference play, they would be 7-14 against quads 1 and 2, assuming I think it would be 8 consecutive losses and a ninth in the conference tournament. So we're talking about an absolute, even worse than the Trae Young collapse, and even at that, they'd probably still be on the bubble. But I'm only going with stone cold locks. I think you also probably have Iowa State ahead of Baylor now.
I do.
Do you think that they are more comfortably in the field than Baylor?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I have Baylor needing one more win to lock up a bid, and I have Iowa State after their victory over TCU this weekend locked into the field.
Okay.
And I think for me, it just comes down to who Iowa State has already beaten.
Houston.
When you have those predictives and you've beaten Houston and Kansas, that's pretty darn solid.
I mean, we're talking. Baylor was as I said, these are the ones and the twos, and then Baylor as a 3 seed I have as a lock. They are the last team that I locked in. Iowa State is the closest to the locks. It's close, but I went that route. BYU in the don't F it up. That's kind of funny for BYU. But do you think they're even remotely as close as Iowa State is, or should they be more in the should be fine range? They are 8th in the net, which I looked up today because I'm writing about really toughest resumes to evaluate just based on basically the biggest splits between resume metrics and predictive metrics. So BYU is 8th in the net. In the 3 normal years, so not including the 2021 year where I think Colgate maybe finished top 10 in the net. We're not going to count that. All 3 years, 2019, 2022, 2023, every top 10 team in the net got a 4 seed or better except for Houston in 2022, who got a 5 seed by picking up their first quad one win on Selection Sunday. So I feel like BYU, even though we talk all the time, your net is more important than, or your opponent's net is more important than your net, but at a certain point, if you're top 10 in the net, the committee paid all that money to get this metric. I mean, where do we have to put BYU in the end?
I think BYU is kind of, to me, they're right in the middle between Iowa State and that Texas Tech, TCU, Oklahoma grouping. Like, I think I could see an argument for both sides, and I don't think either side would be wrong. I think the don't F it up is really true about Baylor, BYU, because if you look at their schedule, it's not that bad, right? Like,
they definitely got the cotton glove treatment for their first year in the Big 12.
They really did. Like, they got a really nice schedule for Big 12 standards. So I think, they should be fine, and don't F it up, because with that schedule, they really would have to F it up.
Texas Tech, TCU, Oklahoma in the should be fine. Which of those teams, if they did fall apart, do you think is most vulnerable based on what they've done to this point?
TCU.
I agree. I think I have TCU as an 8 seed right now. And again, I said there's 31 teams in those first three, so for me to have TCU in there as an 8, they're like just barely. Again, it's not the order that they're in. It's not top to bottom, most comfortable to least comfortable or anything like that. I just kind of picked teams as I felt like they came up for each bucket. But on the bubble, again, not necessarily that close to the bubble, but for Cincinnati, they are. They are my first team out right now. And Texas I have as a 9 seed, but they end up in that same kind of range. Where are you at with Texas now?
I think for me, Texas is kind of more in that should be fine category, just because their wins are so nice that you just imagine you're that committee, and if they're on that bubble on Selection Sunday, it's got to take some convincing for somebody. Somebody's going to be like, well, look at all those wins. I don't know that argument is going to get overcome by any other argument, right? It's whatever the committee members choose to emphasize, and not all of them are going to vote the same way.
Yeah.
But I just think enough of them in that room, if they're on the bubble, are going to be like, guys, like, look at nobody else in this category has remotely as good of wins as Texas. So let's put them in.
I think my concern with Texas hasn't changed. They didn't really do anything in non-conference play, and I believe they're 1-4, or I guess they beat West Virginia, so they're now 2-4 at home in conference play. They do have 3 nice road wins, though. I mean, if you're gonna go 9-9, you want to win your road games and lose your home games, but it's kind of a weird situation where they're, I believe, 5-5 in league play, and they would need to go about 500 the rest of the way, which is why I don't feel like they're necessarily should be fine, because saying you need to go 500 regardless of what your slate is against the Big 12, that's not an easy ask by any means. Kind of close, UCF and Kansas State, both kind of sneaking. I think they're closer than any of Miami, Pitt, or Virginia Tech. If you had to pick one of them that will make it, is it UCF or Kansas State?
Kansas State.
So
I think they've got
win over Kansas is better than UCF's win over Kansas.
I think. Kansas State still has the opportunity to have those non-conference wins over Villanova and Providence gain some steam too. Right now they're not looking great, but could they in 3 weeks? Yeah, maybe. So I think that helps them. I think the fact that they beat Baylor as well. Obviously Baylor's a team we've been talking about as being one of the top teams in the bracket. Yeah. So when you've got 2 of those big ticket wins that Kansas State has, I think, I think kind of close is right for them at this stage, but I think they would be the more likely of the 2 just based on kind of having 2 elite wins compared to 1 for UCF.
I still think it's crazy that UCF is even in the conversation. Like, heading into conference play, I thought Johnny Dawkins might get fired after this season. Like, they were nowhere close, and maybe you consider making a change, but man, they've come on strong, because Kansas State coming into league play was about where they are now, and UCF kind of came out of nowhere. Big East, UConn and Marquette, locks, 1 seed, 2 seed. I don't think there's going to be any argument there. Creighton, don't F it up. Where are you at with Creighton these days?
They are my final 4 seed, and I hate it because I just don't feel like they should be there. Actually, are they my final 4 seed? No, they're my top 5 seed now. I changed that up today. They're my top 5
I
seed.
still have them as a 4, but I
Um,
also hate it.
yeah, but even then, I don't like them at 17th overall. I just feel like that's too high for the lack of quality wins. They're one of those teams that we've talked about this for weeks now. There's some teams that they look better when you look at their quadrant splits than when you
Yeah.
actually look at the teams they've beaten. I think Creighton's a perfect example of that. Like no losses against Q3 or Q4, so the resume metrics are somewhat decent. Predictive metrics are really great, but oh man, like where are the quality wins, Creighton?
Yeah. Creighton feels to me like a poor man's Alabama almost in that most of the time you're talking about Creighton, it's propping up another team because of a great win they got over Creighton. Like, yeah, they don't really have those great wins in their own regard. And I mean, have they? I don't think they definitely didn't beat Connecticut because Seton Hall has the only Big East win over Connecticut. Did they beat Marquette? Have they even played Marquette? I don't for whatever reason I don't have the Big East schedule memorized.
Well, they have that non-conference win over Alabama,
Yeah,
which I think helps a lot.
ironic that it
But
fell to
yeah,
Alabama.
interestingly enough, but um, yeah, Creighton gave some good wins to some Mountain West teams too.
Yeah,
So I think that could definitely be a talking point in the room
yeah.
about. I mean, not only have they not done much against the Big East, they didn't do much against the out of conference opportunities they had either.
It would be funny if we get a six bid Mountain West and Creighton has a lot to do with it, and we end up with just 3 Big East teams, and Creighton has a lot to do with that. No Big East teams in the should be fine. I thought about putting Butler there, but if I have Virginia in the bubble, I think Butler's right in the same spot as Virginia, so I kept Butler on the bubble. Of the 6 Big East teams in the bubble section, though, Butler by far best. Um, Butler, Seton Hall, Xavier, Providence, St. John's, Villanova. Again, not necessarily in that order. I think we're in agreement. Butler is the safest. Villanova is the furthest out. What about those other 4? Do you have any of them in right now?
Providence is my fourth team out of the field, and then I have Xavier's right behind that.
Yeah,
I was surprised Seton Hall wasn't closer for me. When I
yeah,
started ranking teams, I was like, they still got those 4 quad 1 wins, but outside of the 4 quad 1 wins, it's just bad
yeah.
across the
Their
board.
metrics are awful now. I mean,
Yeah,
it was bad. They were going to be if they won at Villanova yesterday. They were going to be my last team in. Now, I mean, they got boat raced in that one. Their metrics got so much worse, and they kept Villanova alive. That was nice of them, but yeah, I don't think there's really any case for them. I think of those 5, I think I have St. John's the highest, but it's like St. John's third team out, Providence fourth team out, Xavier fifth team out, Villanova and Seton Hall in the mix. Like that. That actually is the Big East bubble is going to be awesome the rest of the way.
yes. Some of these teams, honestly, like most of these teams, now that I look at it, I guess half of them have gotten up to my 7 seed or better at some point during the season.
Yeah.
And
God,
now,
Villanova was a 3 seed after
yeah,
the battle for Atlantis.
and now I really do think we're probably looking at 2 teams out of that group's going to make it. I think Butler probably will ultimately make it, and then I think one of the rest of the group is going to get in.
Yeah, and for a while we were talking about the ACC sort of in the same regard, but I think that was always a little bit further back on the bubble where it was like Miami. Oh, well, look at it. Why am I coming off the top of my head? Wake Forest, Miami, Virginia, Pitt, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, NC State. Like there were just 7 teams. It's like, all right, eventually 2 of these are going to play their way in. So far, Virginia has. We'll see if Miami or Virginia Tech or Pittsburgh can.
Well, I mean, something to think about for the Big East is probably 2 or 3 of those teams, heck, maybe more, are going to pick up a Q1 or a Q2 win, if not multiple Q1 or Q2 wins at the Big East
Yeah,
tournament, because they're going to
just
get those
by
neutral court
default.
bumps.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to have to win those
Not St.
games.
John's though. That's a home game.
Yeah, that is a home game for St. John's, but um, we listen, Dave Warlock. But yeah, I think one of those teams will probably play themselves in at the Big East tournament
Yeah.
itself.
I agree. I can definitely see that happening. And it doesn't hurt that the Big East tournament that starts on Wednesday or Thursday. It's over by Saturday night. Like
It's
they're not
Wednesday.
going up against the brink like some of these other leagues are. Speaking of the Big Ten, Purdue, I think they're a lock. Wisconsin and Illinois. A week and a half ago, Wisconsin might have been a lock. Not anymore. 4 straight losses, 2 of them ugly. I mean, you lose to Michigan. If you I think they broke even in the second half against Michigan, which should be illegal the way that team's playing, and then losing, getting blown out at Rutgers. I dropped Wisconsin to a 5 seed. I still think they are very comfortably in. I mean, they have a lot of very good wins, but I have them behind Illinois now. I go 16-17 Illinois, Wisconsin.
I am having trouble with both those teams from a seeding standpoint.
Illinois doesn't have any Quad 1A wins, right?
I want them both to be 5 seeds. To me, in my head, they perfectly line up with what I think a 5 seed should be. And then I look at their competition for the 4 line, and I'm like, who is it? Clemson, Dayton? I don't know who I'm choosing. Like there has to be somebody that goes in there. We talk about this. Like these are not perfect pieces that fit into the puzzle. Not all 4 seeds are alike. Not all 5 seeds are alike. We have a lot of 5 seeds. I'd argue we probably have 10 5 seeds, and we got 4 slots for them. So some teams are getting bumped up to the 4 line. Some are going to be on that 6 line. It just is the way it is.
It's funny. Like if the reveal were today, top 16 reveal coming up on Saturday, in case you're not aware. Ignore the games that happen on Thursday and Friday for it, because the committee will as well. If it were today, the 1s, no question whatsoever. The 2s, I think, no question whatsoever. Even a couple of the 3s are certain. And then who knows what's going to happen. I'm very interested to see what happens with South Carolina, whether they get in or not, how the committee does. We'll save that for Thursday. We'll have another pod before then. No should be fine teams in the Big Ten. Do you think Michigan State, Nebraska should be in that range, or is bubble good for them?
No, I think that's a tough one.
Michigan State did just get that win over Illinois. I think maybe I could move them to should be fine, but
I think so Michigan State, I have them as an 8 seed or 9 seed, excuse me.
Where do you have it? 33? I have them at 33.
I have them at 34. And I have Northwestern sitting 2 spots behind them at 36. So I think Northwestern, Michigan State have really separated themselves from Nebraska. I think Nebraska's road troubles in general is going to keep them down on that bubble. So I'd say, they're all on the bubble, but I think Michigan State and Northwestern are to the point of they're kind of straddling that line between should be fine and on the bubble.
Yeah, they're right there with Butler and Virginia, I would say, which Michigan State does have that 20-point home win over Butler in its back pocket. Kind of close, Iowa. I was surprised when I was going through and found any kind of close team to put on there, because we have not been talking about a 7th Big Ten team in a long time. Have you looked at Iowa lately, or any of these teams? Maybe Ohio State? I don't know.
Iowa's the one team that I think I actually complained to you about them a week or 2 ago, if I remember correctly, because I was like, why won't Iowa just finally go away? Like, I'm tired of giving them a glance over and over again.
That's been Xavier for me for the longest time.
But at least Xavier's gotten close to the bracket. Yeah. Iowa's never close, but they're also never so far away that you can just completely dismiss them.
Iowa is major conference SMU. Because SMU's like 43rd in the net. They just won't go away.
Yep.
And they are on here somewhere. Of the not dead yet teams, they're all pretty much dead. Ohio State, Minnesota, Maryland, Rutgers, Indiana, Penn State. If Minnesota had not blown that lead, they'd be swapped right now. Minnesota would be kind of close. Iowa would be almost dead. But, I mean, obviously if Penn State's on that list at, I think, do they even have a winning record? They might be 12-12. And I don't even think they... All 6 of these teams have at least 2 games left against Purdue, Wisconsin, Illinois, or Michigan State. So that's why I kind of feel like if they were to win out, there's maybe a chance. They all are 500 or better. It's also just kind of funny to have every Big Ten team except for Michigan represented here.
I would say Minnesota and Maryland are the 2 with a somewhat realistic path to me. Yeah. The rest, I think, are really gone.
Yeah. All right, the Mountain Best, as I wrote on here. Nobody's a lock. San Diego State, I think, though, is in the best shape for sure. Seeding-wise, I actually have Utah State ahead of San Diego State, but I'm nowhere near confident because Utah State still has 4 games left against the bottom 4 teams in the league. Utah State is in a very mid-January Memphis position right now, where I think they're 8-4 against quads 1 and 2. It's mostly quad 2. Most of the good on their resume is that they don't have any bad losses. So as long as they keep it that way, they probably are looking at like a 5 or a 6 seed. But they lose to Wyoming, I think that's tomorrow or Wednesday night, or if they drop a home game to Air Force or Fresno State or something, they can plummet in a hurry. They didn't hire Dan Hurley.
I bet we don't have the same top three order at all for the Mountain West. What is your order of teams for the Mountain West?
Utah State, San Diego State, Colorado State, 22, 23, 24.
Okay, you're very close on those. I have San Diego State 21, Colorado State 25, and Utah State 27. I don't like Colorado State's resume.
I don't either.
They got that win over Creighton on neutral courts. That is the thing that keeps them like higher than I really want them to be otherwise. Utah State concerns me a lot. Their resume metrics are fantastic, but when you look at who they've played and who they've beaten, not a whole lot.
They're
not a whole lot there.
That article that I'm talking about for tough teams to seed. Utah State that was the first one I wrote.
I mean, they should be fine, but I think there's some real warning signs there for Utah State.
Yeah.
If they don't turn this around quickly, they could go from a 7 seed for me and a 6 seed for you to the bubble really fast. So I think they're definitely in the most danger. I agree with you on San Diego State being in don't F it up. Colorado State should be fine, and I agree that Utah State should be fine. But there almost needs to be an asterisk there because it's a scary should be fine.
Yeah. What's funny is the way you say that is they should be closer to on the bubble, but the way you're saying it is they should be closer to don't F it up. Like just don't take a terrible loss and you'll be fine. But yeah, they are tough to
They have less of a margin for error.
Yes. Nevada, Boise State, and New Mexico on the bubble. A week ago, I'd have had New Mexico in should be fine, probably right up there close to don't F it up, but then they finish off that sweep of UNLV, and all of a sudden we're looking at their resume, and it's not good. Their best win away from home is a neutral game against Santa Clara, which, granted, Gonzaga couldn't beat Santa Clara away from home, but still, that's like net 117. It's a quad 3 game, and they have a brutal schedule left to go. I mean, New Mexico would be in today. I have them as an 11 seed now. I think you do too, but I do think they're somewhat comfortably in over the cut line, but it can fall apart in a hurry. They still have 4 games left again on the road against the other 5 Mountain West contenders, and a home game I think against Colorado State maybe, and then it's on the road against the other 4. Like it can get bad.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Boise State and New Mexico State I was feeling very good about as of a week ago.
Yeah.
And Nevada was sitting there in real trouble. Now, all of a sudden, I really do think Nevada is in the best shape of that group. I think it's Nevada, Boise State, New Mexico.
Yep. Yeah, I have Nevada as a 9, Boise State as my top 11, I think, and New Mexico on the bubble, 43 overall. So, yeah. I
mean, something Nevada's got going for them is their Q1 record is so nice that it's to the point where if they get this home win over New Mexico, they might not be able to play enough games to not have a winning record against Quad 1. Like, it's actually a potential that they would end up having, even if they fall repeatedly through every other quad.
There is the could lose Quad 1 wins factor, because I think one of their wins is at Washington, which is like 73. The home game against Colorado State, who I believe is 27-28. So that could slip to Q2, and then that's why you try to actually look at the resume, not just the records against the quadrants, but... and then kind of close, UNLV, they're picking up all these. They swept New Mexico. They beat Colorado State, I believe they beat at home. I think they might have 3 of these teams at home at this point with wins over them. And they got that win over Creighton, which, I mean, it was a weird time of year. It was finals week. Creighton just didn't show up for that game, but still counts. That's a great resume win.
One thing that could hurt them, the same thing as St. John's. They play the Mountain West tournament in Vegas, so if they end up getting some quality wins there, they're not going to be as quality because they're going to be treated as home games. So,
I mean, they're still all those teams are top 50-ish. But
yeah, well, but that I know now you're talking Q2 30, versus Q1.
Yeah, that's fair. Although we say that every year about the Mountain West, like, oh, UNLV's. I don't think they've made it past the second round of the Mountain West since like 2013.
Yeah, I mean, like never a contender. And, we're over here talking about, Utah State could be in trouble. Who performs every year at the Mountain West tournament? Utah State. So, should be a great Mountain West tournament, really.
Should be. All right, SEC, Tennessee's a lock. Alabama and Auburn, I'm not ready to call them locks yet, even though they're, I believe, fourth and fifth in the net, somewhere like that. Both of them are going to be on this tough to seed article. Auburn in particular. Where are you at with Alabama and Auburn now? I assume you have probably one of them as a 3 seed because we have to have some questionable team as our last 3 seed.
I have Alabama as 11th overall
Yeah.
in 3 line, and then I have Auburn coming up as my last 4 seed.
Okay.
I did not want them there. I want them to be a 5 seed because they're not getting it done in quad one. But again, like I couldn't
Yeah.
find anybody else to put there. But Alabama's got the same problem. They're just neither team is winning when they're playing quad one games, except against each other because
Yeah.
somebody had to win them. If you
Yep.
actually take away those games.
Yep.
Those resumes look really bad. Like they've actually been each other's nicest friend in some odd way for building up each other's resumes
Yeah,
because they don't have anything else much besides that. So I think they're both really good teams. I think the committee is going to recognize that, but I also don't expect them to get any favors from the committee because they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Like you gotta win games like that. Why else do we play care who wins these games unless it means something? Winning has to matter. So I'm glad the committee put some value on it.
Yeah. I think of these three, Alabama, Auburn, South Carolina, if I was going to move one to a lock, it would be South Carolina. They're 21-3. They only have one loss outside of Q1A. They got a road win over Tennessee, a home win over Kentucky. They don't have much beyond that though. They only have two really quality wins. Like 3 weeks ago, they weren't even really in the tournament picture, but man, they've gone on a 7-game winning streak and they are very much there now.
I don't know if you remember this, but I did have a tweet that just got all sorts of people online were upset about.
People were upset online about something.
How can you possibly say South Carolina is closer to a lock than Kentucky, Auburn, and Alabama? And then I was like, I mean, look at
Yeah.
it. They don't have many chances to lose anymore, and they've got quality wins. So that's what these things are about. It's about looking at the remaining schedule in comparison to where you currently are. And I looked at South Carolina as a potential lock too,
Yeah.
like because I think you could really make the argument that they might make the tournament if they lost every game at this
Yeah.
point. Probably not, but maybe. Like there's really something to be said for South Carolina being that close to locking up a bid, even if their seeding isn't going to be that great.
Yeah, I have them at 14 overall, so middle of the 4 seed line. I'm not comfortable with it again. I'm very curious to see where they end up on Saturday.
I have them 15 ahead of Auburn.
Yeah, and I have Auburn at 15, so I don't know where we're slightly different there. We'll figure it out later. Should be fine. Kentucky, Florida, Texas A&M. Again, not necessarily in this order. I actually have them consecutively in my field. Florida 26, A&M 27, Kentucky 28. So Kentucky is now my seventh team out of the SEC. They've gotten not bubbly yet. They still should be fine, but and they're falling on hard times. Cannot do anything on defense. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, that's the order I have them seated right now. I have Kentucky hanging out as a 7 seed, my second best 7 seed. Florida is my top 8 seed, and Texas A&M is my last 8 seed. I wanted Florida higher actually. Like they were one of those teams where if you look at their predictive metrics, you look at their resume metrics, they should be a top 7 seed.
And they're
arguably a 6.
They're
you know?
clean. They're very clean resume. They just don't have the quality wins. That's
Yeah.
They were a 10 for me prior to that convincing win over Auburn, which in a weird way just kind of made more questions about Auburn than it did really make us believe in Florida anymore.
Yeah, so I do have Florida as an 8 seed, but I almost want to like caveat it that it's like I think they're really like more like a 7 seed. So don't be surprised if they jump up all of a sudden. It's like how do you move from an 8 to a 6 overnight? It's like well they actually weren't that far away from it.
So on the bubble for sure, Ole Miss and Mississippi State. This is like the bubble. I think they're my last two teams in right now. I guess obviously they can't play each other, but
could the committee just let us all see that? How it would be so much more entertaining. Just throw them against each other just for the heck of it. That would be an awesome first four.
Well, if Kentucky drops all the way down into the first four, then two of them would have to play each other. You might as well be the in-state rivals. Nobody kind of close. Georgia was for a while, but I think they're gone at this point. Arkansas got a lot of buzz when I posted this. A lot of people were like, "How is Arkansas not dead yet?"
That I'm looking at him just wondering like, hey,
who did they beat though? They got that quad one AA win over Duke. That's the best you can do. But they still have a really good schedule ahead. I think they're 3-10 against quads 1 and 2. But if they were to win all the remaining games, they would get 4 more quad 1 wins, 3 more quad 2. I know they're not going to win them, but this is the not dead yet. If they pull a South Carolina and go on a 7-game winning streak, there they are. All right, and then we got Pac-12 and other. That's because the Pac-12 doesn't let us watch half of their games, and I hate them now. Stone Cold Lock, Arizona. Nobody in the don't F it up range. I think certainly for the Pac-12, you would not argue with any of that. Should be fine. Dayton, Florida Atlantic, St. Mary's. Am I too high or too low on any of them?
I think Dayton should be in don't F it up.
Yeah, I had them in whatever, in good shape or whatever when I did the first whiteboard update, and then they lost to VCU and just dropped them a little bit.
I think St. Mary's is an interesting one because I don't know what the committee's going to see in them.
Yeah.
I have them hanging out as my last 6 seed now, and I did not want them that high because they have good quad 1 splits, 4-2 against quad 1. That looks great. They've been playing really good basketball. There's that, and that's why I have them as my last 6 seed. On the other side of the coin, resume metrics are still pretty bad. They could get real bad real fast if they drop 2 or 3 games.
Yeah.
So I think they should be fine, but I think the difference between Dayton and St. Mary's there is pretty significant as far as tournament making ability.
If we didn't have so much history with St. Mary's, like getting left out of the field when they had like 28 wins or something, do you think we would feel better about I don't that the long term history I don't think factors in, but it might come in a biased form in a way where we're just we're conditioned to devalue St. Mary's a little bit.
I don't know. They were so bad in the non-conference as far as picking up wins. That at Colorado State game though has aged very well for them.
Yes.
So no, I don't think so. I think St. Mary's, it's a different scenario to me than Dayton and FAU. As far as making the tournament, I feel a lot more comfortable with Dayton and FAU than I do St. Mary's.
I agree, and I do have Dayton and St. Mary's seated a little bit higher. Dayton for sure. I have Dayton still as a 5 seed, and FAU and St. Mary's in that 7-8 range. On the bubble, again, these are not any particular order. Utah, Washington State, and Colorado. I guess I did do Pac-12 on the left and mid-majors on the right, but let's do the Pac-12 first. Utah, Washington State, Colorado. Certainly Colorado is at the bottom of that range. They are probably more kind of close than on the bubble at this point. Do you have Washington State ahead of Utah now in your seed list?
Yes. I have Washington State hanging out at a 35 overall, and then I have Utah coming in at 43 overall. So 44. A pretty significant gap between those two. And really all the credit goes to Washington State for playing well and getting up some quality wins. And then Utah, don't blow your home games. You had Arizona ready to basically be a shoe-in for the field.
Yeah.
You missed it, and then they followed it up by losing at home to Arizona State. That was the real killer, right? It's missing a great opportunity, but then following it up with the second losses, that's awful.
Yeah, and up until that point, I think they were undefeated at home, including a win over BYU, which looks great net-wise. Is BYU a 5 or a 6 seed now? I mean, how good is that win, really? Literally our first pod, 11, 10, 12 episodes ago, Utah was the team I talked about. I think they could fall off, even though I have them as a 4 seed right now. And then the mid-majors, Indiana State, Grand Canyon, and Gonzaga. Again, kind of a wide range there. I think Gonzaga is still a few ticks out. I think Indiana State is kind of comfortably in, but it is also the Missouri Valley. They already played both games against Drake. I think both games against Bradley. So if they were to lose any game, it wouldn't be a good one. So that's why I think they're still on the bubble as opposed to should be fine.
I don't know how many consecutive brackets it's been for me, but I keep getting Indiana State playing Purdue potentially in the second round in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. Do not be surprised if this game happens, because just following the bracketing principles and where we think those teams are going to be placed, I would say, I don't want to say it's likely that it will happen, but it's not very unlikely. I gave it maybe a 40% chance of happening because Indiana State could maybe play themselves all the way up to a 7 seed
Yeah.
and then not be ready to play there, or just drop to a 10, not even necessarily because they've done anything wrong. The committee just might view them as a 10 seed. But if they're in that 8-9 range, I think there's a very good chance they'll be playing Purdue in the second round.
I seem to always end up with them in the West. I don't know why. I'll have like Arizona, and then I think right now I have Arizona, St. Mary's, and Indiana State, and I think it's just because I'm trying to avoid certain matchups on the 8-9 range and whatever. But yeah, I mean, the Indy factor should certainly play. Grand Canyon, what do you feel about them? Are they? I think I have them at 40 now. Before our last pod, you sent me your seed list, and I compared it to mine. That was the only team we were different by more than one seed line. I was like, yeah, I kind of forgot about Grand Canyon for a while. I should probably scrub them up a little bit.
I have them at 40.
Yeah, yeah, I have them at 40. Kind of close. Oregon, Washington, Memphis, Drake, Richmond. Any of them actually kind of close right now?
Yeah, actually, I think two of them are really close. I think in a third, I think is pretty close. I think Oregon, Washington, really not that close at all.
Yeah,
Memphis, I think, has played their way back in
yeah.
there. Those early season wins did not go away, and in fact, some of them are looking a lot better now. Like,
Virginia, right?
yeah, the Virginia game's looking a lot better. They played Texas A&M, picked up that victory. Um, didn't they play Clemson? Am I forgetting that?
I think
They
I
beat
think
Clemson.
I forget.
They beat Clemson by 2.
Well,
And
their only loss was to Ole Miss or something like that. Yeah,
yeah, they lost to Ole Miss, but they beat Clemson by 2.
yeah, okay.
That game happened so long ago, we kind of forgot
Oh,
about
I
that
just
for a
remember their
second.
losses now.
Yeah.
South Florida, UAB, Tulsa, UTSA. Boom.
But no, like those wins are all aging very well.
Yeah.
So Memphis is actually my second team out of the bracket right now.
Oh,
Drake is
wow.
my
Okay.
third team out of the bracket.
Okay.
Just love what they've done in quad one and quad two. It's just very for a mid major. There's not a lot of games to evaluate, and so I think their win percentage has to be very high in quad one and quad two. That's what they've got. I think the 3 bad losses is why I don't have them in the bracket right now. But is it close enough that I could see them getting in? Yeah, I think it's close enough that I could see them getting in.
I feel like I haven't had Drake close enough lately to really inspect their resume. They just keep hanging out there, kind of like SMU. But they had a win over Nevada, right?
That's exactly who
Yeah.
I'm pointing to on the board. That Nevada
Yeah.
win is aging like fine wine.
Yep. All right, and then not dead yet, although realistically, I think they probably all are. James Madison, Princeton. I don't even know why I put Princeton on there. They're dead. Samford is getting a little interesting.
I actually looked at them today for that reason. I was like,
Samford
I mean,
is
could they be?
22-1 outside of Q1, but 0-2 in Q1.
Their predictives are decent.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Appalachian State 3-1 against quads 1 and 2, but they have 3 quad 3 losses, 1 quad 4 loss. It sucks. The game is rigged against these smaller schools. Like, yeah, you beat Michigan's, or they didn't beat Michigan State. They beat Auburn. Then they swept James Madison. It's like, okay, you won your opportunities, but you slipped up too much. And then with Samford, it's like, okay, you didn't slip up, but you didn't take advantage of your opportunity. So we're just asking them to go undefeated. That's all.
One thing that I actually do think hurts App State's case, because I was thinking about them.
Well, they're like 80th in all the metrics. That's what hurts their case.
Well, yeah. So I guess because they've been so good against quad one and quad two, I was like, maybe I should be giving them a little bit more of a look and not just be like completely dismissing them. But the Auburn home win, it's not that Auburn doesn't look great metrically. It's just that Auburn's losing to everybody when they go into their home gym. So I'm like, App State did what every other team is doing, which is beating Auburn when they come to visit.
SMU, Bradley, VCU, San Francisco, any of them, even VCU, you said after the win over Dayton,
I think
they
that
needed to at least
VCU
get
could
into the
be
conversation.
interesting.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because they've got a guy back from injury. And I don't know how the committee would evaluate that.
And they do still have 3 pretty like on the Q1, Q2 border games remaining in the A10 tournament. They could get something against Richmond or Dayton. I mean, they're interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think they are interesting. The rest of those teams, I don't. SMU, man, like you mentioned it, just what are they doing this year? Like, they're one of those teams that you're like, how are they this high in the net? Like, because I haven't really thought of them at all this year. It's just like they've been playing basketball, but they don't have a single result that's interesting.
That will be the case next year when they're in the ACC as well. That'll do it. This is all whiteboard. It'll get erased and redone, but it's a fun conversation for now, and we'll see what happens the next couple of weeks. But we'll be back on Thursday. I'm sure we'll be almost entirely dedicating that to the top 16 reveal, but we'll see what happens the next couple of days to throw us a wrench. But take care. We'll talk to you soon.